Hello, and welcome to my little video about Aster Look Outside. Probably the most underrated companion in the entire game. Probably next to Papanu, but that's probably a topic for a future video. Aster is just a character that gets lumped in with in like stuff like C tier and B tier and a lot of tier lists, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize his potential in some aspects. Since even though he has a lot of struggles compared to other characters, he can definitely do really good. And I feel like he has a lot of niche scenarios where he works really well in. And I feel like people just need to know how to effectively use him a little bit. But let's firstly just go over Aster, a bunch of aspects about Aster real quick. So let's talk about Aster stats wise, and mainly his lack of stats. HP and stamina, they're just like bang on average. I think maybe he's a little bit more than the average character. Um, though he does have quite higher just like baseline stats due to his astronomer cloak that he has. He also has the whole 50% incoming shadow damage and chance to be killed by unconsciousness. Um, But other than that, Aster doesn't really have too many big stat opportunities. Like he can do a lot of damage with a very specific strategy. However, it does take a little bit of setup and quite a bit of stamina to actually like pull off. But we'll mention that later when we talk about his skills. Now let's talk about one part about Aster that is pretty bad. He is probably the second in progression wise. He is probably the second last companion you'll get, with the other companion being Felipe. Since you have to go all the way through the sewers and then through the and then go through the sewer encampment, then talk to Barrel, and then you should be a-okay. You also do have to talk to Aurelius, which is a pretty big downside, but uh, we all have our problems, don't we? So let's talk about some of his skills. I think Aster has some of the most underrated skills in the entire game. Um, I think he probably has one of the best skills in the game that I don't think I see too many people talk about, and that is actually. I think it's just such an insane skill. He could just get rid of so many problematic status effects, mainly like charm, paralysis. You can also use it alongside something like Helen with rage armor to get rid of rage. So then they basically just get the 50% more damage. Aster does have some pretty bad skills. Like I think he's got something called like argue. I believe that's what it's called, and it's just like terrible. I think timeout is a little bit of a gimmick. It can be really good. It just doesn't proc that much. Strategic huddle is pretty good. It's a really good team wide effect. However, compared to other companions like Ernest and Dan, who act more like a support character, their team wide buffs are a lot better. Like for example, Dan can basically give everyone extra damage, and like 50% more attack and ballistics. Well, Ernest has like a multitude of defense spells, like his Song of Strength, his Song of Defense, and basically everything else he has. Thinking about any other notable skills, we do have Fire Escape, I believe that's what it's called. Is a really situational skill, but I think the situations that come up are very good. Like, for example, Furnace. Aster basically makes Furnace uh, into a joke. Uh, it's also pretty good for Angel, for when you want to eventually fight her, because, you do take quite a bit less damage from her baseball bat. Nothing too much though. However, I feel like one aspect that doesn't really get talked about with Fire Escape, uh, or no, it's called Fire Safety. I just remembered. Um, is it also works with acid, and that can be very good for certain situational fights. Like, for example, at the top of my head, we have the slime enemy, and then we also have the slime hydra, which it can be very effective against. And I don't think there's any other skills I should probably talk about. Actually, guess what? I was wrong. There's actually one more that's actually very, very underrated. And it's boring lecture. I think it is a very powerful effect. Uh, Sleep is kind of a gimmicky thing. Like it can be good. But it's like most of the time you'll get rid of it by accident because like maybe your character's agility will be like the character that makes them fall asleep. Does it first, and then they start getting attacked by your other teammates, and then they just get rid of sleep. However, it has a very special synergy with a specific item called the Hadal Trident, which I'm pretty sure at the top of my head works like if they have the drowsy effect, they take 25% more damage, and then if they're sleeping, they take 1.5 times damage. And the good thing about the Hadal Trident is it has the penetrate skill, which is really, really good. And it's already like a 4 times damage multiplier. So you're doing that plus 1.25 more damage, basically. And you can do some really insane numbers. Especially against certain enemies, since they'll have a weakness to shot, to pierce, I mean. Which will just basically ruin them. Oh yeah, there's also what's out, I guess. I just don't really use this. It can be useful for like maybe like a Sophie, Aster, Audrey build, but like I don't know. It's not really that notable to me at least. But I do like the whole text about it, like the whole Aster's birthday thing. I think that's probably the best part about it. Now let's talk about how Aster fares against other companions. Uh, what do you mean by other companions? I'll talk about the other support ones. Mainly Dan and Ernest, like I mentioned earlier. Dan has some really good healing skills, like support skills. I mean, he has his, I believe it's called like Bless, the one that basically makes the party do 15% more damage and higher ballistics, which can be really, really good. Uh, he also has healing. He also has mass heal. He also has his own version of actually from like a similar thing. However, I don't think it does similar. I think it gets rid of less status effects or like less good ones. Like I don't think it gets rid of blind, which actually does. Um, Dan also has some really, really good offensive skills. However, to use them effectively, you will have to sort of build them around it. Like, for example, using something like the eye amulet to make sure you don't get blinded. But he can have some insane damage potential. He also has a really cool passive effect, basically, where you'll be able to get like some sort of money from him based on his views at the end of each day, which I find to be a like very cool mechanic. And it's a sort of like extra bonus you get with him. It's not like the most insane amount of money, but it's definitely something, and it can help you in your journey. Talking about Ernest, Ernest just has a bunch of nice status effects things. However, he doesn't really have too many good damage options. Like he only really has feedback, and that really isn't the best thing nowadays. He's kind of more like Aster in that way. But I think a lot of his skills are definitely very good. He's got Song of Strength, he got Song of Defense, Song of Willpower, which is very underrated. Probably one of the best like contenders for best skills in the game. It's just such a powerful effect you can get. Uh, but he doesn't really have too much other than that. Like he has Rousing Song, but that's just kind of mid. I believe you can use it in like a specific Audrey strategy, like high agility Audrey, but that's like a whole other thing. And they do have double time, which is basically just a worse, what's it called? A worse mosh pit. Though it can be pretty good in certain very specific strategies. Uh, Also, talking about Ernest as well, he starts off with. He also has Colonel Squeakums, which is probably one of the best parts with his kit as well. Since it can apply blind, he also has that one thing where he can feed them and then they start going crazy. But yeah, I feel like compared to the other support characters, Aster does feel a bit lacking in a little bit. And it's probably just because his strategic huddle isn't as effective as like um isn't as effective as the other support skills, like 50% more damage, all of that. Not saying it isn't bad, like it gives you higher hit chance and critical rate, which is really good for Helen. Um but it's like, would I rather have that or 15% more damage? Or like the bonuses from Ernest skills. I don't know them exactly at the top of my head right now. But I just feel like his skills that affect the entire team are kind of more situational and aren't as good, per se. At least to me. Though I am absolutely sure Aster makes it up in a lot of different ways, especially like his actually being the best status effect. Basically the best thing to get rid of status effects. Also, talking about Dan as well, probably should have mentioned this as well, but his skills are based on his viewers, and that can be quite troublesome, especially since some of his more supportive skills get rid of quite a bit of viewers, which makes it so your overall damage output is worse, and also your healing skills just aren't as good as well. So I think it's time to get on to the conclusion of this video about Aster. I think he is a deserved A tier. I feel like he's probably a bit on the lower side of A tier, especially compared to what the other characters can really do at their best. But I feel like Aster's a really good support character. His main downside is how late you can get him. However, if you know how to quickly get to the sewer by like day 3, it shouldn't be too bad for you. Um, so you can get him by around like day 3, which if you know what you're doing, of course. Uh, his status effects, even though other characters like Dan can technically like apply stun and whatever, his effects they attack like every enemy that you're currently fighting, which can be really good for certain super bosses like Beryl, Spine Tingler, I think that's his name, Honko, and then Godma, and probably a few others, like Kingdoms of the Dump one. Uh, and his natural ability to be resistant to shades makes him probably the best character to do if you're going for Spider, at least. He can also do some pretty insane damage for a support character if you use him right. Probably not as much as Dan, but definitely a lot more than Ernest, who can really only use stuff like Colonel Squeakums to do high damage. And, high damaging melee weapons like, Tooth Hammer, like hack and slash, basically. But yeah, I think Aster is a deserved A tier. Though I do think some aspects of him needs to be changed, meaning like some of his percentages should be higher. Like I feel like he should be guaranteed to apply drowsy. I feel like that would make him a lot better. Maybe some like maybe for like timeout, maybe just maybe make it so he also does some damage as well. It would make it so sometimes you basically waste it and you would get no stuns. So you basically just lose 12 stamina. And I feel like that would just make it, slightly more worth it. Also, just get rid of argue. It's terrible. I genuinely think it's the worst skill in the game. Just remove it, Frankie, please. But yeah, that's my final thoughts.